We are joined by my colleague from the NFL Media Group. So many questions for this man 8 days before the draft, Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. How you doing, Tom?
It was nice to just get a break from draft prep to read Stephen Root's IMDb page. Ghost blew my mind. Did not remember it, but Google confirms.
Yes, he was the police sergeant that Demi Moore went to when she thought that the Whoopi Goldberg character was trying to, freak her out because,
Spoiler alert. I mean, come on.
Dude, what do you mean spoiler alert? Ghost is from 1990. Are you out of your mind?
I'm kidding.
Okay. But anyway, so you can confirm. My sources confirm. Per source, he was in Ghost.
Molly, you in danger,
So
girl.
let's get into this thing here, man. You set the world a little bit aflame on Friday with a report that Kyler Murray is going to hold out if he doesn't get a contract. Is that where we currently stand right now, Tom?
Where we stand, Rich, is that there's been no negotiations. Obviously, this is at an earlier stage in the offseason than we've often seen these big quarterback deals get done, but you're in a unique environment right now because the quarterback market, like some other positions, has really exploded with some of the deals that have gotten done recently. And also, you have the situation where Kyler Murray's agent came out in February at the start of the scouting combine and made abundantly clear he thought the time is now for everyone to get a contract extension done. And you certainly, in hindsight, when you look back and Aaron Rodgers signs for what's in essence a $50 million per year extension, and Deshaun Watson gets 5 years, $230 million fully guaranteed, and guys like Matthew Stafford and Derek Carr, who are older, are getting 40 plus. You certainly can understand the argument that it would have behooved the Cardinals to act sooner. So they never responded to the contract proposal that Kyler's agent, Eric Burkhart, initially made. A few weeks ago, Burkhart, after some of those deals got done, informed the team that proposal is now off the table. So that's where we're at. It's really, we're still early in the offseason. We'll see how things play out from here. As of this moment, my understanding is Kyler Murray has not requested a trade, and the Cardinals are insistent they will not trade him, but other teams are absolutely monitoring this situation. And you would think if we go to the nuclear option in this entire thing, it would happen in the coming days prior to this NFL draft, because in whatever 10 days here, some teams are going to have filled their quarterback holes, and any compensation that would go back and forth between clubs would be out into the 2023 draft.
So let's drill down to what the heart of the matter, I think, is, and see if we can get to the heart of it. Are the Cardinals diametrically opposed to giving Murray a contract before year 4? Is that the issue here, or what? Why isn't there a contract conversation happening right now?
The Cardinals' stance has been, we want to sign Kyler to an extension eventually. We want him to be our quarterback. That's something that the team would like to address this summer. But you go all the way back to the tail end of last season, where Kyler didn't play his best. The team didn't play its best. They stumbled in that nationally televised playoff game against the eventual Super Bowl champions. And on Super Bowl Sunday, our buddy Mike Garafolo, among others, reported that there were conversations after the season between the owner, Michael Bidwell, other people with the Cardinals, and Kyler Murray, that they wanted to see more from him from a leadership perspective. I think that everybody who was going through the same pre-draft process 3 years ago knew that Kyler was never going to be a type A typical leader quarterback. He's a little bit quieter to himself. That's just how he's always been. And at Oklahoma, guys followed him because he's just really, really good at football. That's kind of the way that he's approached things in the NFL. The Cardinals would like to see more of an evolution, but whatever was said in those meetings went over so poorly that Kyler deleted the Instagram photos, and that led to the statement from his agent and the attempt to start contract negotiations that never, at least to this point, went anywhere. And so you're just kind of in an uncomfortable situation right now with a player who, granted, he's under team control for the next several seasons. He's due about $5.5 million this year. They got the fifth-year option for 2023, which I would certainly anticipate they would exercise. They got franchise tags beyond that. But if you're Murray and you're thinking, I got a $200 million plus payday coming my way, then the prospect of, okay, well, he'd give up a $4.5 million roster bonus in August, and he could get fined, and they'd claw back signing bonus money, and start losing checks. If you're talking about giving up $8 to $10 million to secure that $200 million, there's reason to believe, and I certainly expect that if there's not a contract extension, and if Kyler Murray is still under contract to the Cardinals, that he's not going to play. He's not going to be starting week 1 for $5.5 million, and the ball is really now in the Cardinals' hands in terms of where things go from here.
So then, if there are questions about his, the stuff that Mort, tweeted out on Super Sunday that Murray called nonsense the next day in a tweet, and there are questions about his viability to win a championship based on his first foray into the playoffs this year, then that seems like they'd want to see what a year 4 looks like before they really commit. But you're saying they're willing to commit during the summer. Then if you're willing to commit during the summer, you don't need to see any more. You've already seen enough to commit during the summer. Then why not commit before the draft? Is it because they don't want to seem like they were pressured by the statement that I'm holding up from on the wonderful Kyler Murray stationery that got put out by Murray's agent Combine Week? Like, why not now then? Right? What's the holdup?
Well, I would say willing to commit is also a relative term here because, again, based upon where the quarterback market is going, are the Cardinals willing to give Kyler Murray $45 million a year? Are they willing to give him $50 million a year? That's where the numbers are going, and so it's an evolving type of a situation. The Cardinals' stance has really just been they needed to focus on free agency, and they had all those free agents off their own team. They lost some pretty important players between Chase Edmonds and Chandler Jones and Christian Kirk and Jordan Hicks. Did bring back a couple of guys, Zach Ertz. They brought back A.J. Green. They brought back James Conner. But really, they didn't add at all in free agency, which was another thing that Murray wanted to see. Okay, you're not going to spend the money on me right now. What are you going to do with it? It's hard to argue that as we stand here today, and granted, still got the draft upcoming, still got a whole off season. It's hard to argue from a personnel perspective the Cardinals are better today than they were in January. This all plays into it as well. So to the extent that the Cardinals were looking at when other deals got done, when Josh Allen got his extension, when Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, those were all May, June, July, August type of deals. That has been the normal timeline. But none of those guys had their agent put out a lengthy statement saying, I want to get paid right now. And that's just altered the dynamic in the relationship. The unspoken message here seems to be, listen, I want to be a Cardinal, but I also want to get paid. I don't want to wait. And if you're not going to pay me, I want to go and find out who will.
And is that the reason why he's trying to force the situation before the draft? Because, again, if it's been communicated to him, we'll take care of you during the summer, then why won't Kyler Murray wait until the summer? Because, you can say Christian Kirk, left. He got paid by Jacksonville, and Chandler Jones is now on Vegas. But what other spot will he wind up in a huddle with DeAndre Hopkins and A.J. Green, right? And Zach Ertz and the rest of that offense, James Conner. So why is Murray forcing the issue now, do you think?
If you're going to have a massive quarterback trade, it generally has to come before the draft. Ideally, it would come before free agency even has begun. But think about it from both ends. From the player's perspective, you're going to have fewer places that you potentially could go. You're going to have fewer suitors. That can impact your leverage in the situation. From the team's perspective, if they're going to trade him, which, again, the Cardinals are insistent they're not trading Kyler Murray, you also would be motivated to do it now because if you start talking about 2023 draft picks in a deal, those are basically downgraded from 2022 picks. So it has to move one way or another here. Not saying that, the Cardinals are under any type of pressure. They can do whatever they want, and they can do what they're doing now, which is really nothing, all the way through the draft. And then at that point, there's going to be, the standoff of, okay, what happens? What kind of offer do they make them? Are they able to get something done? Do they take this entire thing into training camp? But if a deal happens from both ends, now would be the time for that to take place, which is why Kyler's end started forcing the issue earlier in the off season. And I would certainly anticipate that they're going to want some answers about the direction that this entire thing goes in the coming days here, or else they're going to have some decisions to make about how they approach things leading up to next Thursday night.
All right, Tom, before we move on to another conversation piece about the draft, let's button this conversation up by placing you in the lane of sports talk radio, okay? I know that you're an information individual and you've got information and you're dealing facts, but I'm going to have you, and there's no crystal ball, but I'll ask you what's more likely, which is a conversation we have here on the program. Right, Chris? What's more likely?
Fridays, baby.
All right. I'm going to give you three choices. What's more likely on draft day? Okay. Murray is traded. Murray gets the contract. Or Murray demands a trade on that day, a la Rodgers last year's draft day. What do you think? Nothing happens. He demands a trade. Okay. I'll give you.
Right.
Nothing happens. He demands a trade. He does, in fact, get traded, or he has his contract and everything's hunky-dory. What do you think?
What we know as of now is that the Cardinals say they're not trading him, that there are no negotiations. So the most likely scenario would be the trade demand. The Cardinals could change that tomorrow if they step up and go, we'll give you 5 years and $250 million. That's why they have this kind of in their court right now. There's been no indications they're going to do that. So, yeah, if you're laying odds on this, I would certainly lay the odds on the trade demand. But let's see what happens in the coming days.
So, as for the NFL draft, Tom Pelissero, the quarterback market also taps into Baker Mayfield's future. It's quite fascinating that that's the situation entering the 2022 draft, that Mayfield's sitting around, and the question is who might trade for him beforehand and thus they don't take a quarterback, or who's going to trade for him after because they didn't get the quarterback they wanted, or who's going to be out of the market for him because they did, in fact, get the quarterback they wanted. Walk me through what Mayfield's options are as you and I are talking at the moment.
Well, really, there's not very many seats that are still available if you're talking about a starting job or a chance to compete for a starting job. I mean, you've got Seattle, you've got Carolina. Pittsburgh would be surprising because they already had Mitch Trubisky. They're more likely to draft one. Houston potentially could be in that market. The point is you don't have a whole lot of spots. And to this point, there's not been a lot of indications that anybody wants to put forth draft pick compensation for Baker Mayfield at a time that you still got the draft coming up and you might have other options to fill that spot. So the Browns are in a position where Baker, because of the 2020 CBA, they had no options with him. It was already fully guaranteed, so they owe him $18.8 million. They're going to have to eat a good chunk of that to get value in a trade for Baker Mayfield. And the question now becomes, do they push to just get the best that they can prior to the draft beginning? Because the moment that round one starts, some teams are going to be acquiring quarterbacks through the draft, and you're going to lose some potential suitors. Or, if the offers just aren't very good, if you have offers, then do you wait it out through round one, then see who missed out through the first round of the draft and, see if your leverage actually increases on Friday? Those are the decisions that Andrew Berry has to make right now. From Baker's perspective, he wanted to go to Indianapolis. There was at least a chance that could have happened, but then a rare opportunity to get a former MVP pops up with Matt Ryan. They made that trade instead. Baker said in that podcast interview or whatever it was that, he thought Seattle was the most likely option. My understanding has not been that the Seahawks right now are looking to make a trade for Baker Mayfield. You got Carolina, which our buddy Ian Rappaport has talked about as potentially the most likely landing spot. I would certainly agree that Carolina, one way or another, I think by next Friday, let's call it, is going to have another quarterback on their roster. The question is just, do they do that at number 6? Do they potentially trade back from 6 to get back a pick in the second or third rounds? Because right now they don't have one. And then try to get somebody either lower in the first round or, through rounds 2 or 3? Or are they the team that just, they stand pat, they take a tackle, which was their other big priority in this offseason, and then they look to trade for a Baker Mayfield or a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Kyler Murray or whatever it might be
wow.
Come day 2 of the draft. I mean, those are all the kind of interconnected pieces of this. I mean, I can't think of a lot of scenarios where you had a couple of quarterbacks like this. I mean, established guys. Baker Mayfield won a playoff game like 16 months ago. He had his best season. He's sitting there with $18.8 million fully guaranteed, and it's pretty apparent right now that he's not going to be playing for Cleveland again, though there certainly is a scenario where the Browns would just say, you know what, Deshaun Watson may or may not get suspended at some point. We're not going to release this guy. We owe him all the fully guaranteed money, so we'll wait it out. Maybe he does start at the start of the season if he's willing to show up. You got Jimmy Garoppolo, who's been to a Super Bowl. He's been to an NFC Championship game. He's sitting there in no man's land because everyone believes that Trey Lance is going to be the quarterback. I know there was talk that the 49ers have been offered, a couple of second-round picks for Garoppolo. I would fairly tell you, Rich, if that had happened, Garoppolo would have already been traded. So they're still seeing how this entire thing plays out. There's been some potential suitors, Carolina, maybe Houston, that could pop up along the line. But there's not a lot of scenarios like this in recent NFL history where a couple of guys who have won games in the NFL, a high draft pick, guy who's been to a Super Bowl, are just sitting there. And everybody believes they're being traded, but the spots are beginning to fill up. So keep an eye on both those situations, again, leading up to Thursday night, but then potentially even on Friday morning and afternoon before we get into round two.
And before I let you go, is there something up with Deebo Samuel? What's going on with him in the Niners? What do you know?
Deebo Samuel certainly would like to be paid, like all the other receivers who are looking at the current numbers. I'm sure they're looking at the puffed up ones, but even the real numbers on those wide receiver contracts have changed the dynamic a bit. I would not anticipate you're going to see Deebo showing up through the course of this offseason. And that's another situation that other teams within the NFL are going to be monitoring because he is such a rare piece in the NFL. I don't think the 49ers would have any interest in trading a Deebo Samuel, but until those situations get resolved and in the current environment, media-wise around the NFL, Rich, and on social media, anything seems possible at this point, and so that's absolutely one to keep an eye on here over the next week.
All right, and then so tomorrow you're going to have your annual piece on the quarterback draft class in advance of the draft. How do you assess it as we're 8 days away? What do you got for me on that?
I would say, I've talked to dozens of coaches and scouts and general managers over the past couple of weeks. Everybody basically prefaces their comments on this class with something along the lines of, if you need a quarterback, this is not the year to go get one. Having said that, this is a unique draft for a variety of different reasons. You don't have that Trevor Lawrence, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray type of guy who's pretty clearly going to rise to the top of the class, heading into the draft. There's nobody really in discussion for, obviously the number one pick with Jacksonville, but nobody's looking to trade up for a quarterback right now to number one overall. But you still got five guys who all could, under different scenarios, get into the first round. I believe Malik Willis is going to go in the first round. He's just got the rarest traits and playmaking ability and a huge arm and running ability. He, like a couple of the other quarterbacks, Matt Corral and Sam Howell, just plays in an offense where it doesn't really require a lot of bandwidth. So there's going to be a learning curve, and everybody's trying to project that out. But Willis has impressed people. He's a likable guy in terms of meeting with him. I think he's going to go quickly. Kenny Pickett is the other one that I'm pretty confident is going to go in the first round. The question there is just, okay, he's the most ready, but how much better is he going to get? And then you've got Matt Corral from Ole Miss, who is polarizing both in terms of his play as well as all the background, which was, teams had to do more homework on him than just about any other player in the draft. It seems like, everybody at Ole Miss backs him up in terms of who he's become as a player, as a person, as a leader. But there are some things, early on in his career at Ole Miss that teams had to dig into and get comfortable with. You got Sam Howell, who, he ran the ball like 183 times or something last year, ran for 1,000 yards. Again, plays in a really simplistic offense, but there's a lot to like with him and the toughness and the, and the leadership. It's just a matter of, again, how much better is he going to get? And then Desmond Ridder, who maybe has helped himself more than anybody over the course of this process in terms of his interviews being really good, in terms of, he tested off the charts. It's just, can he throw it well enough. I think all those guys, Rich, potentially could go in the top 50, which would be right in line with other recent classes here. There's scenarios where they all could go in the first round, particularly because as you get into the back half of round one, there's some of those positions that commonly fill those spots, whether it's interior offensive line, defensive line, where there just aren't very many guys to take. And then, some teams are probably going to try to leapfrog the Lions at 32, maybe go get a quarterback, get the 50-year option on them. It's going to be fascinating. Everybody, in terms of GMs, as they're trying to project this and doing their mocks, everybody says this is going to be really unpredictable, and the quarterbacks are a big part of it.
And then just a general sense of who's first overall right now, 8 days away. What do you think?
The Jaguars have not shown their hand on that yet.
Right.
There certainly is something to.
Well, when you're talking to everybody,
Walker, and it's not as crazy as what people may have believed when they first began to hear that. He's really, really talented. I think he had like 9 sacks in his college career, which is not how you normally look at an edge guy who's going to go number 1 overall. But he is certainly in the conversation. I would anticipate Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan is in the conversation. Ike Ekwonu, I think, is probably going to be the first tackle off the board, so he'd be a factor there as well. I'm sure Jacksonville also would love to, potentially have somebody wanting to trade up to number 1, but when you don't have that clear frontline top number 1 quarterback prospect, it's tough to get those calls.
Tom, thanks for the call, man. Appreciate the call here. We had a trading places type moment earlier on this program. He appeared in hour number 1. We hung the phone up, and a major news story broke. So turn the machines back on. Turn the machines back on for after Jeff Darlington reported what he reported. We got to turn the machines back on for my guy Tom Pelissero back here on the show. How are you, Tom?
I'm great, Rich. And real quick on Tory Dandy, it is a name that people should know. Mm-hmm. And before anybody starts to think he's the guy who drives the wedge between all of his star clients and teams, he also did Mike Williams' deal to keep him with the Chargers recently, and did Denzel Ward's deal with the Browns a couple of days ago.
Damn. So
extension done. He's had a year, and it's probably going to keep getting better.
Fine and dandy. Hey now, that's what I call next level, and maybe a few others would not. Okay. So, what is the split with Deebo and the Niners all about? Best you can tell us, Tom Pelissero.
It sounds like there's multiple layers to this, Rich, but certainly one of them is Deebo Samuel wants to be a receiver and not a receiver/running back. His rushing attempts were significantly up last season from where they've been in the past. We all know that he's a really, really physical player, but there probably are some concerns here about longevity. The counterpoint to that, of course, is that the part of the reason that Deebo Samuel is so valuable is because he's versatile. And one of the things Kyle Shanahan does as well as anybody in the NFL is, run the same plays out of different personnel groups, move people around, use them in different ways. That's a big reason that Deebo Samuel is, the player that he is, because he can do all those different things. But, in the big picture, it sounds like the role is part of the reason that Deebo wants to play someplace else where he may just be able to be a true wide receiver and potentially tack on some years to his career.
So why what? And then Kyle Shanahan's like, what? Don't tell me what to do? Or like they couldn't hammer that out? Or was this an issue last year when he kept getting the ball? Do you think?
It sounds like it's something that's played out, these conversations through the course of this offseason. Everybody sees where the wide receiver market is going. The 49ers were willing and wanting to engage with Deebo Samuel, as other teams, frankly, should be right now, because the numbers are just going to keep going up and up. This trade request actually happened a couple of weeks ago, hence me dancing around your question an hour ago on the show.
Okay.
I did not realize that our good friend Jeff Darlington was going to tweet that a minute after I got off the air. But, yeah, they've been trying to deal with it. They stand ready to try to extend him. Deebo, it sounds like, has just decided in his mind he's better off going someplace else where he might be used a little bit differently. There's going to be a line down the block for people trying to trade for him, and the 49ers are going to have to make a decision here. Do they trade one of the most unique weapons in the NFL, recoup some of the draft capital they don't currently have because the trade up a year ago for Trey Lance, or do they settle in and tell him we're not trading you and play the long game? So far, it's been a couple of weeks. They obviously have not yet done a deal with Deebo Samuel, but we'll see, as we have with Devontae Adams, with Tyreek Hill. Both of those, were situations that played out behind the scenes for, days or weeks prior to, guys all of a sudden everything escalating quickly and being traded. Don't sense that there's anything imminent on the Deebo Samuel front, but again, as we've seen with other cases, these things can get moving quickly.
Oh, my goodness gracious. I got to tell you, I didn't have on my bingo card Deebo didn't want to be a running back / wide receiver. Because that does make him a unicorn. That's why, if I was the Jets, I'd want to give up the 10th overall pick for him. That's why the phone's ringing off the hook. So is there like a happy medium that he can't, is that something that all teams that might be acquiring Deebo, that they need to check with him first to see what his idea of his running back play limit is, like carries that he's willing to do at all?
You absolutely have those conversations because you're going to need to work out a contract extension with him. So that's all going to be, part of this. At this point, again, I'm not under the impression the 49ers have given Deebo's agent, Tory Dandy, permission to talk to other teams. I think we all know that there are various back channel conversations that happen in all these types of situations. But one of the interesting things is, remember, Kyle Shanahan has a lot of his former assistants who are coaches of some of the teams who may be interested in Deebo. So whether that is Matt LaFleur in Green Bay, whether that is Matt's brother Mike LaFleur, who is the Jets offensive coordinator, those guys have seen, whether they were part of the staff or just from watching from afar, they've seen how Deebo Samuel has been used through the course of his career. Again, yeah, that's a big part of Deebo's value. But he also was a 1,400-yard receiver last year. The scheme and the way that thing is set up and the way they move him around is a big part of his production and why he's so valuable. But yeah, Deebo seems to believe that he's going to be able to max out his earning power and extend his career if he's not taking as many of those hits. And in the current environment, when you look around at guys like Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill, who have made up their minds they want to go someplace else and have gotten their way, I certainly understand the mentality of some other receivers who might be saying, why can't I pick my spot too?
So just to wrap it up, and put a point on it here. So the trade request is public now just because he told Jeff Darlington and Jeff tweeted it out. But it's been known within the building there for a couple of weeks. And this is not over money. This is over his usage, and significant usage at a position where anytime somebody hits 30, it's over. So he would prefer not to be a running back at all? That's basically what you're saying, Tom?
It certainly sounds like I think he had 53 carries or so last year, which is 4 times what he had ever had in another year in his career. Sounds like that is too much for him at this point. He'd like his role to be more, of a true receiver. There's also a reason, Rich, when, a trade request was made 2 weeks ago, we were aware of it. Other people were aware of it. It came out for a reason today, and it goes back to the conversation we had in the last hour about Kyler Murray. Why do agents or players bring these things to a head prior to the draft? Well, because that's your best time to make things happen, ideally to be before free agency, but from the player's perspective, to be able to go places where teams still have resources and they haven't drafted somebody else, and also for the teams, if the 49ers are willing to trade Deebo Samuel, which it doesn't sound like at this point that they have committed to do, but if they're willing to trade him, it absolutely makes sense for them to do so prior to the draft, because when you're talking about 2023 picks versus 2022 picks, every GM in the league would look at those as basically a one-round downgrade. You'd be getting less for Deebo Samuel in June or July than you're getting in the next 7 days here.
Tom, thanks for the call. Again, appreciate it. I don't plan to speak to you next hour, but look for my text just in case. Thanks for the call.
I'll be available.
All right, thanks, brother. You're the man. It's Tom Pelissero right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Once again, wow. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.